Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's Keegan here. I'm back with another video once again, and hope you're all having a nice day so far. Anywho, it's time for another movie review video. And before we get started with this episode, there's two things I'd like to say before we get started. Today's episode is going to be a little bit longer than my usual episodes, as we're going to be talking about 6 movies in this episode. Normally, I would limit it to at least 3 or 4 movies per episode, but this time I'm going to try to review 6 movies this episode. I was originally going to do it into 2 parts, where I talk about 3 movies in one video and review the other 3 in the next, but I've decided to try to review all 6 movies into one video, so this episode will be a little bit longer than some of my other episodes. And lastly, I know I said I was going to get this video done yesterday and have it uploaded, but then some stuff got in the way. I had some stuff to do, and I was being a little lazy afterwards and just didn't really have the time or the mood, or wasn't in the right mood to doing the video. So I do apologize for the slight delay of this video. But with that out of the way, let's get started. So for today's episode, we're going to be talking about all 6 of the Final Destination movies, including the new one, Final Destination Bloodlines, which came out last week. Now, I revisited the first 4 movies the week before the new one came out and watched the 5th one for the first time. So we're going to be talking about every single movie in this franchise in one video. And I'm going to try to keep this spoiler free as possible for the new film when we get to that one. So yeah, without further ado, let's talk about them. So we'll start with the first film, of course, Final Destination. This film was directed by James Wong, who co-wrote the screenplay, and it was originally released on March 17th, 2000. So this film turned 25 a little while ago. I remember the first time I watched it. I remember watching it on TV when I was like 10 years old. This would have been back in 2011, just before Halloween. And I remember the movie blew my mind, and I really, really enjoyed it when I was a kid. Watching it now as an adult, it's not exactly a masterpiece or a great movie, but it is a really enjoyable film and a great first entry to the franchise. And I know this film the concept for this movie was originally going to be used for an episode of The X-Files, but then it became its own standalone film and had nothing to do with The X-Files. But it is interesting to know that the concept for this film was originally going to be used in an episode of The X-Files before it became its own movie. And another thing about this movie for me, while this movie is more of a thriller, it technically is the first horror film I ever watched, even though it's more of a thriller. Well, depending on who you ask. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let's get into the story, and then we'll get into my thoughts on it. So this film follows a guy named Alex, played by Devon Sawa, a high school student who's going to Paris with his friends and classmates as part of a field trip or something. I'm assuming it's French class and they're all going to Paris for a field trip. Anyways, they all get boarded and they're about ready to go, and just a few minutes before takeoff, Alex has a premonition of the airplane exploding and crashing just as soon as it takes off. And just before the plane is about to take off, Alex freaks out and warns everybody that the plane is going to blow up. But because nobody believes him, he and several of his friends and classmates and one of the teachers gets kicked off the plane. And then once the plane does take off, the plane does blow up and crash mid-flight just as soon as it took off. And in the weeks that follow after the tragedy, Alex's friends are getting killed off one by death because they were supposed to die on the airplane, and then death decides to go after them one by one in the order of who was supposed to die first. And without giving away too much, that's basically what the story of this film is about. Now, this was a really good start to the franchise. While I wouldn't say it's a great movie, it does have its flaws, but it's a one that I really enjoyed, and I do have a little bit of a special spot in this movie in my heart because this was like technically the first horror movie I ever watched, and it really blew me away. And for a little while, it made me believe that death would come after you if you cheated death. But hey, I was 10 years old at the time. You believe in? I was just a young, impressionable kid back then. But it does have a lot. It has an interesting premise, and it does have a lot of tension throughout the film because you don't know who's gonna die next and how they're gonna die, because death can happen out of anywhere. And there's also some cool kills in this film too, like the way how some of the characters died. Like the bathtub scene was pretty cool. The part where they're in the train yard and the train hits the car and a piece of the scrap metal gets in the middle of the track and it flies and cuts that one guy's head off. That part was pretty cool. And I also really like the music in this film too. And the composer of the film, I forgot her name. She did a really good job with the music in this film. And all in all, this was a good start to the franchise, and the movie was a box office success when it came out back in 2000. And because of that, it would spawn multiple sequels that would follow, which we will be covering very quickly. But other than that, while Final Destination isn't exactly a great movie, it is a film that I really enjoyed, and I think it's a good start to the franchise. But I don't have anything else to add, so I'm giving Final Destination a 7 out of 10. Now we move on to the sequel, well, the first of 5 sequels actually, Final Destination 2. This film was directed by David R. Ellis, who also directed Snakes on a Plane and The Final Destination, which is the 4th film, which we will be getting into in a little bit. And this film was originally released on January 31st, 2003. Now, Final Destination 2 is often regarded as the fan favorite film of the franchise, and is famous for the most well-known opening premonition of the whole franchise, the log truck accident that occurs on a highway, which there is no denying that scene was really cool. And for a long time, I actually believed that they were using real logs for that scene, but it was actually all CGI. And the reason for that is they were originally going to use real logs for that scene, but it turned out the logs didn't bounce enough as much as the filmmakers hoped it would, so they had to resort to using CGI. And I must say the CGI actually looks pretty good on that scene, especially considering that the movie came out in 2003. And yeah. So Final Destination 2 takes place a year after the first movie ended, and it follows Kimberly, played by AJ Cook, who is going on a spring break road trip with some of her friends. And they make their way down the road to a highway, and they're about to make the turn onto the highway when, you guessed it, Kimberly has a premonition of a big car wreck that's about to occur because of a logging truck. And then Kimberly manages to stop and save some of the people from going onto the highway. But of course, much like the first movie, Death doesn't like that she and several others cheated Death. And Death starts to go after the people who were supposed to die one by one, much like the first film and the other films. Now, this was a pretty good sequel. I liked it. I thought it was a pretty good follow-up to the first movie. The deaths in this one are over the top, but they're fun to watch too. And the characters are a little bit cookie-cutter characters that are not fully developed, but they're fun to watch, especially seeing how their characters get killed off one by one throughout the movie. And I know Devon Sawa was supposed to make a return to this movie, but there was a dispute with him and the producers over his pay for this movie. So because of that, they couldn't really resolve the issue, so they had his character killed off screen, which was kind of lame. I kind of wish they brought him back, but I could totally understand the reason why Devon Sawa didn't return for the second movie. But other than that, Final Destination 2 is a fun sequel with some pretty cool deaths, like the part where there was an explosion and there's this razor wire fence flying up against this guy and it cuts into pieces. That part was pretty cool too. And let me think. without giving away too much. There's a part where one of the female characters gets her head stuck in an elevator that is going up, and her head is stuck between the shaft and the door, and then you guessed it, she gets decapitated. That was a pretty creative kill. But I don't have too much to say about Final Destination 2. It's a good sequel. I liked it, but I think I liked the first movie slightly better. But this one was still a lot of fun to watch, and is often regarded as the best film in the franchise, depending on who you ask, of course. But anyways, I don't have anything else to add, so I'm giving Final Destination 2, much like the first film, a 7 out of 10. On to Final Destination 3, obviously the third film of the franchise. This one has James Wong returning as director, who previously directed the first film. And this film was originally released on February 10th, 2006. This movie stars Mary Elizabeth Winstead in one of her early movies. You might know her from the movie Scott Pilgrim vs. the World and 10 Cloverfield Lane. This movie was also one of composer Shirley Walker's last movies she composed before she passed away at the end of November of the same year. She also did the music for the first movie, and the last movie Shirley Walker ever composed was for the remake of Black Christmas, which would come out the same year. And I got a bit of an interesting story about this one. I actually watched this one around the same time I watched the first movie on TV. Although I didn't watch the second movie until many, many years later, which I know it's weird, but for some reason no channel was airing the second movie at the time when I watched the first and third movie. I know it's kind of weird. Now the plot for this one is very similar. You got a group of teens who were supposed to die in an accident, although in this case, a roller coaster accident. But then one of their friends, who our protagonist is Wendy, played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead, has the premonition and gets most of them off the roller coaster, but doesn't save the rest once the accident occurs. And because of that, well, you guessed it, death goes after them one by one, killing them off in some pretty ways that comes off as pretty cartoony, but really entertaining to watch at the same time. Well, not much else to say about that. This one, it's alright. It's not terrible. It's not the worst one in the series. It's one of the weaker ones in the franchise, I'd say. I mean, there are some good kills in this one, most notably the tanning bed scene where there were two girls that go to a tanning salon, and then the bed catches fire and they both burn alive, which that scene was probably the most famous part of the whole franchise. Although I know that death was actually inspired by another movie called Urban Legends Bloody Mary, I believe. I don't remember, but it was one of the Urban Legend movies that the tanning bed scene was inspired from. And the deaths in this one do get a little bit cartoony, but they're fun to watch despite how cartoony they get. Like, there's one scene where they go to a drive-thru and there's this big semi-truck that's about to crash into the truck. And our protagonist and, well, our two protagonists get out of the truck and the truck crashes, but then the engine comes out and the spinning part just cuts the back of the guy's head off. It was pretty ridiculous, but it was fun to watch too. But Final Destination 3 is fun to watch, but it's not my favorite film of the franchise. But I will say the tanning bed scene is probably the best part of the whole movie, and it's kind of the highlight of the whole movie. It's definitely one of the more famous deaths of the whole franchise. But it's not my favorite movie in the franchise. The characters are just there. They're just there to die. You're not really there to root for them, I guess. But it's not bad. It's not my favorite film in the franchise, but it's fun to watch. But I don't have anything else to add, so I'm giving Final Destination 3 a 6.5 out of 10. On to the worst one of the franchise, in my opinion, The Final Destination, or as I like to call it, Final Destination 4, because I hate how they title it. They make it sound like it's the last film of the franchise, but we all know that didn't happen because there were two sequels that came out after it. This one was again directed by David R. Ellis, who directed the second film, and it was originally released on August 28th, 2009. And this would be the first film of the franchise to be shot in 3D. Now, interestingly, the third movie was originally going to be shot in 3D, but the plans for it to be shot in 3D was scrapped for whatever reason. So it wouldn't be until this movie when they started using 3D. And keep in mind, this movie came out the same year as My Bloody Valentine, the remake, of course, and Avatar, and a couple of other movies that were starting to use 3D, like the Tim Burton adaptation of A Christmas Carol and so on. This was back when people actually gave a shit about 3D movies. I don't think anybody really cares about 3D movies anymore. This movie is also the shortest film of the whole franchise, with only a runtime of 82 minutes, which is shorter than any of its predecessors and the films that would follow afterwards. I remember not liking this one when I was a kid. I remember watching it on TV, and I didn't really like it as much. But I had to watch it again in preparation for Bloodlines, and I can honestly say it's the worst film of the franchise. But we'll get to that in a moment. Now, the story, you can guess, it's the same. You got a guy who gets a premonition of an accident occurring, although this time the accident occurs at a racetrack, which is something that doesn't happen too often to the attendees of a racetrack, but it happens to drivers all the time at these kind of events. But so the character with the premonition gets some of the people out of the racetrack, and then the accident occurs. Of course, they cheat death, and then death goes after them one by one. What else can you say? It's simple. Now, I already said this. I didn't like it. I didn't like this movie as a kid, but after rewatching it recently as an adult, this was worse than I remember it. The problems with this movie is that it feels really rushed, especially considering the 82-minute runtime. Although, if you don't count the opening credits and like the opening and end credits, it'd be like 75 minutes long or something. So it's definitely the shortest film of the whole franchise, too. Another issue I have with this movie is that the characters are not very well developed, and they're just characters you don't really give a shit about whether they die or not. And while the deaths in this movie, some of them look pretty cool, but the problem with a lot of the deaths in this movie is that a lot of it is all CGI, and the CGI looks really, really bad. And I know that this movie was made for 3D back then, and I bet it might have been cool watching a lot of these death scenes unfold in 3D back then, but I wasn't able to experience it because I was 8 years old when this movie came out, so of course I wasn't old enough to see it in theaters. But I bet it might have been cool watching it in theaters back then. But the cool things I can say about this movie have to do with the opening credits and the final death scene at the very end of the movie. They're all shot in an X-ray like style. Like in the opening credits, it shows some of the previous deaths from the other films that came out before this one, which looked pretty cool. That they all looked like X-rays, especially in the final death scene where the three characters get run over by a truck. It looked really cool, and it kind of reminded me a little bit of 1,000 Ways to Die, if you guys remember that show. I know I do. But I can't be the only one who thought it looked like something out of 1,000 Ways to Die or something. But other than that, this movie is terrible. It is not very good, and is by far the worst film of the whole franchise. It's just not very good at all. And I mean, I get it was shot for 3D, and that's why all the deaths look so in your face and stuff. It's just the CGI just looks really, really bad, and I just do not like this one at all. But one thing I have to give this movie sort of credit for is that it was one of David R. Ellis's last movies. Oh, actually, this was his second last movie. His last movie was Shark Night, which came out in 2011. And then after that movie, David R. Ellis passed away in 2013. So I have to give it somewhat of respect because this was one of his last movies. But other than that, the Final Destination or Final Destination 4, whatever the hell you want to call it, is by far the worst film of the whole franchise. And I'm giving this one a 3 out of 10. On to the next film, Final Destination 5, which was not directed by either James Wong or David R. Ellis. Instead, it was directed by a different director, Stephen Quayle. And this film was originally released on August 12th, 2011, so it came out almost 2 years after the Final Destination. And I actually watched this one for the first time when I was binge watching the previous films in preparation for Bloodlines, which we will be talking about next. I actually like this one. This one was pretty good. It was much better than the Final Destination, but I'd say the first movie was better than this one. And no, I'm not going to spoil it, but this film starts off with a bridge collapsing with a premonition, and then you guessed it, the person with the premonition gets all of his, well, actually in this case, it was all part of a company of coworkers that were going to a business retreat for a couple days, and they were riding the bus to the retreat. But then the bridge collapses, and the person with the premonition gets them off the bus. And you know the drill. They all cheat death, and then death comes after them one by one. And the deaths in this movie are much better than the ones in the Final Destination. Like, there's a part where a guy gets a massage, and yeah, you probably guess where it goes from there if you've seen the movie. You might know what I'm talking about. That one was pretty cool. And I also liked there was also the eye laser surgery or whatever the hell you want to call it. That part was pretty cool too. And yeah, there were some really creative kills in this one, and some of them are pretty memorable. And I really, really liked the twist at the end, which I don't want to spoil it, but I can honestly say it totally caught me off guard. I'm like, holy shit, that was totally unexpected. But I don't have much else to say about this one. It was pretty good. And this was actually the second movie in the franchise to be shot in 3D after the previous film. And I bet seeing this one in theaters in 3D was pretty cool back then. And while this movie was much better than 4, I would say the first movie was better than this one, but it was still a pretty good sequel. But I don't have anything else to say about this one. We'll just get by this one pretty quickly. But I'm giving Final Destination 5 a 7 out of 10, I guess. And finally, last but certainly not least, Final Destination Bloodlines, the new film of the franchise. This one was directed by Zach Lipovsky and Adam B. Scott, and this film was released last Friday. I saw this one in IMAX on last Thursday, which for some reason some of the theaters in my area were released the movie a day early. Although they release some movies a day early before they actually come out, which is kind of sweet. And I was able to catch it last Thursday in IMAX, and I loved it. And I definitely can agree that this is the best film of the franchise since the original. And it should also be noted that this film is also the final film for actor Tony Todd, who unfortunately passed away back in November at the age of 69 from a battle with cancer. And Tony Todd was actually in some of the previous films in the franchise. He was in the first, second, third, fifth, and this film. He played as his character, William Bloodworth. Although his character didn't actually appear in the third film, he actually did the voice of the devil creature, animatronic or whatever, at the roller coaster scene at the beginning of the third film. But he was in all the movies except for the fourth one, because he was not available in the fourth one for some reason. I'm not sure why, but it doesn't even matter. But I gotta say, Tony Todd's cameo as his character in this film for playing the character one final time, I gotta give him respect for that one. Like, he was really sick at the time when his scene was filmed, and it was nice, and he looked really, really skinny, and it really showed that he was really sick when they were filming that scene with his character. And the way he like his final words of his character, like I'm sure I'm not the only one who kind of shed a tear at that. It was just, damn, that was definitely a good send off for Tony Todd. Now this one is a lot different than the other films. It starts off in the late 1960s, where you have a couple who go on a dinner date at this new skyscraper restaurant that was opened, and then one of the couples gets a premonition of an accident occurring that would kill everybody in the building, and then she warns everybody, and then everybody gets off the building. And then the film flash forwards to the present, where the granddaughter starts experiencing nightmares of the exact same premonition. And it turns out death is going after the family, as this family was never supposed to exist in the first place. If the grandmother hadn't died in the if the grandmother died in the skyscraper accident, they would never have been born. And over the years, since the accident was avoided, many of the survivors were killed off one by one. And then eventually, death starts to kill the family members one by one. And they all are trying to figure out how to get it to stop before they all get struck by the Grim Reaper. And without giving away too much, that's the story of the film in a nutshell. This was definitely a big step ahead. Like, this was like even better than any of the sequels, I'd say. It's like, this movie is everything the sequels should have been. Like, in fact, it's also the longest movie in the franchise too. It's almost 2 hours. It actually has a runtime of 1 hour and 15 minutes. So it's a lot longer than any of the other movies of the franchise. One of the biggest things I like about this movie is that how well developed the characters are, and instead of the movie being centered around a group of friends, strangers, or colleagues that are getting killed off one by one, you have an entire family that wasn't supposed to exist in the first place that are getting wiped out one by one. And seeing this movie on the big screen was, I had so much fun seeing this one on the big screen. It was so busy when I saw it. I saw it in IMAX, and it was just, wow. I had so much fun with this one. And the deaths in this one are really creative, and they're pretty grisly, too. And it mixes between practical effects and CGI, which I think is pretty cool. Especially a lot of the practical effects for a lot of the wounds and stuff look really, really cool. And the deaths in this one are really, really cool. I don't want to spoil any of the deaths, but my favorite one has to do with magnets, which, if you've seen the movie, you know which one I'm talking about. That was like the best part of the whole movie. And, wow, this one was just a lot of fun and is the best film of the franchise since the original, in my opinion, of course. But all in all, Final Destination Bloodlines does everything the sequels should have done, and it did a great job with it. And it is without a doubt the best film of the whole franchise. And I also really liked Tony Todd's appearance in the film. He wasn't in the film for very long, although to be fair, he wasn't in the other movies for very long. Although actually he was in the movie a lot longer in the 5th one, but he had a small appearance in the other movies. And I thought it was a really good send-off to Tony Todd. May he rest in peace. But all in all, this one was a lot of fun. And if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. And I would recommend you check it out in IMAX if it's still available. I don't think it's playing in IMAX anymore because the new Mission Impossible just came out yesterday. But if you do somehow are able to see it in IMAX, then I would recommend it. It's definitely worth seeing in IMAX. But, yep. Anyways, I don't have anything else to say, so I'm giving Final Destination Bloodlines an 8 out of 10. Well, that's about all the time we've had for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like, comment below, and if you're new to the channel, feel free to subscribe. What is your favorite movie in the Final Destination franchise? Let me know in the comments below. And thanks again for watching. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day, everybody. Peace. Bye-bye.